Morning, everyone. Welcome to our brief, warm day before I hear there's more snow on the way. Thank you so much for joining us here in East Boston in front of a place that is a hub for community, a sanctuary for our families, and an example of what a true commitment to early education and care looks like in partnership with the entire community. So thank you to our hosts here today. You will hear from Joe and everyone later. I also want to recognize some of our leaders who are here with us, many of whom will be speaking, but there were far too many people who could fill up an entire day with all of the work that's happening around early education and care. So I want to especially lift up Alexandra Valdez, who is Executive Director of the Mayor's Office of Women's Advancement, who we will hear from, Jarrett Royster, Chief Operating Officer of the YMCA of Greater Boston, Jason Sachs, Early Education and Executive Director of the Office of Early Childhood at Boston Public Schools, TeeAra Dias, who's the Director of Universal Pre-K at Boston Public Schools, of course, Madam Chair, Jeri Robinson, Chair of the Boston School Committee, Cherie, Founder and CEO of Smart from the Start, Lauren Kennedy and Sarah Muncie, who are both here with us from Neighborhood Villages, really innovating in what's possible across the city. And of course, my colleagues in government, Senator, Councilor Lydia Edwards, and State Rep Adrian Madaro. All of the programs represented here are dedicated to closing the gap for early education and care in Boston. We know this is an urgent issue for anyone who has had to go through the pandemic with kids, for anyone who has had to try to find a seat in Boston and navigate the many, many complicated systems and registrations and applications. This is time for city leadership to step up and help convene and provide a one-stop shop. We know that the pandemic has deepened every challenge that the city is facing, and our childcare gaps and access and the stresses on our early educators have certainly deepened as well. In Boston, in Massachusetts, we have the second highest costs of childcare anywhere around the country. And we continue to see the impacts of that ripple throughout our communities, throughout our economy, and throughout our city. And so today we are here to announce two pieces around early education and care. The first is the results of the early education and care census that was led by Alex's office last year. This is an annual census that is conducted just to understand the needs and realities of our early education and care ecosystem from families, from educators. And we currently have opened the period for families to respond in 2022. But we're here to report back that, unsurprisingly, the vast majority of families who participated in this census reported that they are looking for formalized care, but having trouble finding it. Many of our families are relying on some informal arrangement, often with a family member, often not covering enough hours that are needed. And 81% of the families undergoing this kind of informal arrangement are headed by women, and are also reporting that this is impacting their own careers and their own professional development. The costs are high, the need is great, but the opportunity is tremendous right now as well. And so it is time to truly tackle root causes, to understand just how much our childcare infrastructure is the foundation for families to thrive all across our city and beyond. And so today we're also announcing the creation of the Office of Early Childhood in the city of Boston. This will be an office that pulls together all of the strands of work happening across City Hall, whether it's in the Mayor's Office of Women's Advancement, coordinating with the offices at the Boston Public Schools around universal pre-K and early education, coordinating with programs that sit in the Boston Public Libraries and Boston Center for Youth and Families, and convening with partners across the city to really create a streamlined one-stop shop for access to all the quality programming that exists across the city. Okay, so before I pass this on, un poco en español, estoy aquí con los líderes en la comunidad de activismo y enfocada en el cuidado infantil. Esos programas representados aquí se dedican a cerrar la brecha en la educación y el cuidado de niños. Pero siempre podemos hacer más. Estoy emocionada de anunciar la nueva oficina de la primera infancia. En esta oficina vamos a preparar a los niños para una vida de oportunidades, ayudar a las familias trabajadoras y honrar el trabajo de nuestros cuidadores de niños. El cambio transformacional requiere llegar a las raíces y no hay mejor lugar para empezar. Entonces, I will pass it on now to our colleagues in government. First to State Representative Adrian Madaro, who's not only been a partner on issues across the city, but is one of the sponsors of key legislation that we're hoping to see move up at the State House, and he will tell you more about that. Adrian.
Thank you, Mayor Wu. Good morning, everyone. It is wonderful to be together on this beautiful day. Glad that we were able to have this event in East Boston before the storm comes this weekend. But it's also quite fitting that we're here at the East Boston YMCA, headed up by our good friend Joey Gaeta. This is a cornerstone institution to provide early education and care for families and children in East Boston. I'm also a proud former board member here at the East Boston YMCA, so very excited to have this announcement at this location. I want to thank Mayor Wu for her commitment to these issues. I think it's extremely exciting that we're here learning about the announcement of the Office of Early Childhood to streamline all of these things in what were before kind of stuck in silos in municipal government, to get them all under one roof can only benefit youth and families in our city. And I'm also incredibly grateful for her partnership on the Common Start legislation. This is a piece of legislation I am one of the lead filers of. It calls for universal child care for residents in Massachusetts. This is such an important issue that certainly was needed before the pandemic. But the pandemic has only exacerbated the need for universal child care. I have fielded calls from constituents, particularly single moms in East Boston, who have their jobs waiting for them. And the only reason why they can't return to the workforce is because they either cannot afford child care or access child care. This is something I now understand much more intimately because I have a 9-month-old son. This is the first child for my wife and I, and we are on a number of wait lists for child care. And the only reason why we've been able to return to the workforce is because my mom is right now the primary provider of daycare for our 9-month-old son, Mateo. So this is an issue that is impacting so many families in our city and certainly across the Commonwealth. I'm grateful to see municipal leaders like Mayor Michelle Wu step up and do what they can at the city level, but we certainly need action at the state level, and that solution is the Common Start legislation. So I'm really grateful for Mayor Wu's partnership on that, and I remain optimistic that we'll be able to continue this partnership, continue the collaboration and the work that we're doing on this legislation, and hopefully get it over the goal line so thousands of families and youth can benefit. Thank you so much.
Next up is State Senator Lydia Edwards, who has been a champion on issues related to protecting working families, not only from the legislation she's filed and passed and shepherded through on the City Council related to paid leave and who qualifies and what the access needs to be expanded across the city, but also in fighting for a workforce that is too often invisible and not valued according to the incredible services and foundation that they're helping invest in our youngest learners. So passing it on now to State Senator Lydia Edwards.
Thank you so much, Mayor Wu. And again, I want to echo the thanks and congratulations to not only the mayor, but also to the YMCA for your incredible leadership over the many years in many neighborhoods throughout the city of Boston, if not the state. They have stepped in so many ways and stepped up during this pandemic. And I have to say, I should say actually across the country, I'm a YMCA kid, but over in Michigan, I used to go to the YMCA and used to have access to childcare and after-school programs. So the YMCA's dedication for well over a century to our families of all colors, of all backgrounds, of all income levels is something that we should always celebrate and see as a model. And that's why I'm so happy to be here today at the YMCA to be part of this announcement, to dedicate an institutional seat for early childhood education, for early childhood. You know, the fact is, investing in that is investing in environmental justice and racial justice and economic justice. As the mayor mentioned, I cut my teeth in organizing for domestic workers, care workers, who are the prime people who are providing care and early education right now for many of our children, if you can afford one. And still, many of those who are working were exploited. So they're part of that conversation. And I do want to thank Alexa and the Office of Women's Advancement for being here today, because it's so necessary that we see the two connected. We need to see Black maternal health as part of this conversation as well when we're talking about early education. And we need to also make sure that we're talking about workers' rights, not just for domestic workers, but for care workers who have care within their homes. And finally, what the Y and many early education centers represent is not just a place for children to be, but for a place for children and families to thrive. What you'll find is their partnership with Massport has them have HEPA filters and ways to have cleaner air in their institutions. What you'll find is their partnership with many of our food banks allows for good quality food and free meals for a lot of our children in East Boston and throughout the country. So what you're seeing is an investment in actually feeding our children, keeping them healthy. In many cases, they're the first responders and the first people who will notice if there's something wrong with the teeth, with their skin, with any other medical issues, and they'll be able to help parents see where these things are. So I want to thank the first responders in care and families. I would say that that's what you are. And I want to thank, again, like I said, the Women's Advancement Office and the Mayor's Office in general for this dedication to families and to young children. I do not have children. It is because it's a financial decision, a very hard one to make, honestly. And I would love to be a mother one day. I'm putting it out there to the universe. But I also need my bank account to be able to match that. And that's something also I want people to understand. And this office will help create the institution, the foundation, and your legislation, Representative Madaro, will make sure it's easier for all of us to be family and one day mothers and fathers in this Commonwealth. So thank you.
I'd like to invite up Joe Gaeta to tell us a little bit about what's happening right here.
I'm not Joe Gaeta, but thank you, Mayor Wolf. We, on behalf of James Barton, our President and CEO, couldn't be here today. We are really humble and grateful that you all decided on the Y today as your destination to make this very important announcement. We as an organization are very eager to deepen in our partnership with the city and BPS. Together we have sort of a shared vision. The YMCA as an organization is the largest provider of childcare in the Commonwealth outside of the public school system. We shepherd more than 20,000 kids annually through our pipeline of service from the day that they're born and to the day we send them off to careers, and hopefully they have enough money in their pocket so they can have children, right? So as an organization, we have an audacious goal. And that goal is that all 20,000 of our children will remain on a pathway to success, and that no child's zip code will determine their destiny. We acknowledge that we can't do that ambitious goal alone, that it takes a village, and that's why we have great gratitude for BPS in the city. Together for more than 20 years, we have worked to provide high-quality care for families. Together we have 6 UPK classes around the city, including one here at this site in East Boston. And the program is simply just fantastic. BPS provides us with the curriculum, the training, the coaching, and the mentoring of our staff, while the Y provides certified teachers and space. And we provide those critical wraparound services for our children and families. We feed children because we know hungry children can't learn. We provide rent assistance to families because we know stable homes matter. We provide ESL classes to the adults in the families so that families could have a good, strong, meaningful careers. In closing, I just want to just say this. If we know as a country that the first 5 years of a child's life are the most critical for brain development and social emotional learning, and the science of how we raise children to fulfill their potential continues to evolve, it just makes sense that the city is creating this office solely dedicated to providing us, the first responders, with the resources we need to do our job to keep every child on a pathway to success. I again like to thank Mayor Wu and her team, and I'd like to thank Alexandra Valdez, Jeri Robinson, TeeAra Dias, Cherie, Pratima Patil, and Jason Sachs. I hope all of you have the opportunity to join us to see the fantastic work we're doing inside of our childcare. I'm not Joey Gator, but I am the original Jarrett Royster. Thank you.
Thank you, Jarrett. Sorry, I'm going off script, out of order. Next, I'll bring up Alexandra Valdez, who runs our Mayor's Office of Women's Advancement. This is, again, not only the office that has led the childcare census to understand the latest across the city, but also runs our Childcare Entrepreneurship Fund. And a couple days ago, I was honored to be part of the newest orientation of about a dozen of our community-based providers. This was one of our orientations run all in Spanish, and it was incredible to see the energy and the excitement to keep building out our network and ecosystem of providers across the city. Alexandra.
Thank you so much, Mayor Wu, and good morning, everyone. Buenos dias. It's so great to be here. I just wanted to start by saying some residents have already received the amazing child care census survey, and it has received to the doorstep, and we look forward to reading and calculating the results for this year, and on top of that, focusing on the importance of creating this new office that we're doing here today. Today is such an exciting day for all of us. Childcare is the foundation of a strong community. With the Office of Early Education, we are deepening the city's investment in high-quality, accessible childcare solutions to early childhood professionals, families, and of course, their little ones. I am thankful for Mayor Wu being alongside champion for prioritizing care needs as a public good. As a new mother of a 4-month-old, I'm optimistic that Boston is committed to making his first year the best ones. And like we mentioned earlier, and we heard from everyone back here, my mom is the one taking care of him as we speak today. The Office of Early Childhood Education will not only create opportunities for further support care needs, but it will empower professionals, largely represented by women of color, and women who are in every single one of our neighborhoods. Last week, Mayor Wu had the privilege of coming to the first cohort of a Spanish-only cohort with about 50 women from all over the city. And as soon as she logged in, it was all praise and so thankful for her to be there, but also thanking her for making sure and for prioritizing this. And not only that, for being the advocate that she is to make sure that early childhood education is at the top of all of our lists, and most of all, is a priority for all of us around the city. Up to this point, the Mayor's Office of Women's Advancement has worked to close the child care gaps with community voices and center. We've been able to create funding initiatives like the Child Care Entrepreneur Fund, which has helped over 200 women in the city of Boston and have been trained, and more to come ending this fiscal year. So we are super excited to be able to not only offer in Spanish, but also when the program started, we offer in Vietnamese, Cantonese, and also as languages come in, we offer different translations as needed per the providers. We kicked off the Spanish-speaking cohorts, and a huge thank you for everyone who stopped by. And also a main focus on some of the findings that we found on the child care census, which I already even mentioned. We want to focus on creating affordable child care. That's something that we hear every single day from providers who call us to our office, from advocates, from family members, and also from the providers themselves when we speak to them in regards as to what do they need in order to continue progressing to be the successful providers that they are for our children. We just released the 2022 Child Care Survey, and it's been mailed out. Please make sure that you fill it out. please make sure that you look out for it. We also have it online in 7 different languages available. And if the language that you need is not available online, we'll be more than happy to provide it in the language that you need. And I'll do a little translation and I go back to English. Hoy estamos un día súper emocionados en la nueva oficina de niños en la base de una comunidad muy fuerte. Con la Oficina de Educación Temprana estamos profundizando la inversión de la ciudad, solucionar lo que es el cuidado infantil y asegurar que las proveedoras y otros en el sector tengan la oportunidad profesional de la primera infancia, familias y, claro, los bebés pequeños. Estoy más que agradecida con la alcaldesa Wu por ser líder desde hace mucho tiempo en la defensa para priorizar estas necesidades. Como nueva madre de un niño de 4 meses, como ya escuchamos muchas personas hablar antes de mí, mi mamá actualmente es la que cuida a mi bebé. Entonces ahí vemos lo importante que es tener una accesibilidad y a la misma vez ofrecer cuidado que es para la familia y para el costo de cada familia en nuestras comunidades y también en la ciudad completa. La Oficina de Educación Temprana no solo creará oportunidades para apoyar aún más las necesidades de tanta atención y desarrollo temprano, sino que empoderará a una profesión que está representada la gran mayoría por mujeres, mujeres de color y mujeres que representan a toda nuestra comunidad en la ciudad de Boston. En este momento, la ciudad de la promoción del avance de la mujer ha trabajado para cerrar las brechas de los cuidados de los niños con las voces de la comunidad en el centro. Asegurándonos de que la comunidad sea el centro de todo nuestro trabajo ha sido llave para asegurar de que todo lo que hagamos en la oficina sea exitoso. Y con el apoyo de la alcaldesa Wu, la semana pasada tuvimos la oportunidad de inaugurar las 3 primeros cohortes totalmente en español. Y le doy las gracias por su liderazgo, por la oportunidad de asegurarse de que la educación infantil está al frente de la agenda y sobre todo es una prioridad para la administración. Para mí es un orgullo. Tuvimos también la oportunidad de escuchar de las personas que respondieron al census que recibieron el año pasado. Como habíamos escuchado, asegurarse de que la accesibilidad fueron uno de los tópicos que escuchamos más de los concerns que tenían los residentes. Aparte de eso, también escuchamos lo que es tener accesibilidad a cuidado en sus propias ciudades. Muchas personas trabajan, la cual no tienen acceso a tener el cuidado fuera de su casa, del trabajo y a la misma vez el pago, que es algo tan importante que hasta las mismas proveedoras y trabajadoras infantil nos han comentado de lo importante de tener accesibilidad y sobre todo lo que es asequibilidad con el precio de cuidado infantil. Hasta hoy día hemos ayudado a más de 200 proveedoras en la ciudad de Boston, la cual son de todos los diferentes vecindarios y representan a toda la mujer de la ciudad. Para mí es un orgullo continuar este gran trabajo y sobre todo estar aquí el día de hoy compartiendo esta gran noticia. Acabamos de publicar la encuesta de cuidado infantil del 2022, así que si ustedes ven que le llegan un papelito en su correo, por favor, no lo voten. Asegúrense de llenarlo y está accesible en 7 diferentes lenguajes. Y si por alguna razón el lenguaje que está en nuestra página web no es el lenguaje que usted habla primeramente, por favor, póngase en contacto con nuestra oficina y con mucho gusto le daremos la oportunidad de llenar el census. Una vez más, para mí es un orgullo estar aquí el día de hoy y sobre todo estar aquí con Michelle Wu, la cual siempre ha sido un advocate para asegurarse de que todo lo que tenga que ver con la educación temprana esté en su prioridad. Thank you so much, and I really look forward to all the great work that we are to do in the Office of Women's Advancement and the new office creation. We look forward to working together and most of all to continue partnership to make sure that childcare and early childhood education continues and maintains a priority. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we'll hear from our partners at the Boston Public Schools. First, Chair of the Boston School Committee, Jeri Robinson, followed by Director of Early Learning at Boston Public Schools, Jason Sachs, and then Director of UPK at BPS, TeeAra Dias.
Good morning, everyone. First, I want to say how grateful I am to Mayor Wu, her team, and all who have worked so hard over so many, many years to advance this work on behalf of Boston's youngest children and their families. I would especially like to acknowledge Farah Sarah, the VPS Deputy Chief of Academics, who is also here with us today, and many long-term colleagues, including TeeAra Dias, who you'll hear from shortly, Jason Sachs, and Cherie, the Executive Director of Smart from the Start, and many others who are here today who have really dedicated many, many years to getting us to this day. As one who has dedicated my entire career of over 50 years to advocating for and ensuring enhanced access to all inclusive early education and care, I'm heartened to see this important next step in our city's progress. We're sending a message to our families today that Boston is united in our work to help our youngest learners get off to the right start through new supports to them and their families. Many years ago, one of the projects that many of us were engaged in was something called Connect the Dots for Boston Tots. And I'm heartened today that maybe we have actually begun to connect those dots. So thank you.
Hello, I'm Jason Sachs. I work at the Boston Public Schools, and Universal Preschool has not only transformed community-based programs in that we have given staff compensation for the first time. They get the same salaries as Boston Public Schools starting salaries, and we've improved partnerships. Now it has also changed the way we do kindergarten and first and second grade through changes in curriculum. So early childhood principles are beginning to permeate into the public schools. Families first, social emotional relationships, strong early childhood instruction that's appropriate, developmentally appropriate, play, joy in classrooms. And so early childhood is something that we all need to embrace. And so I thank Mayor Wu for prioritizing early childhood, and all of us, we will commit to partnering with you, and I will give you my colleague, TeeAra Dias, who runs the early childhood UPK program.
Greetings, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. I just want to shout out our early educators, our teachers who are currently in the classroom. Shout out to them. And I want to thank the YMCA team for having us, the entire team. Thank you so much for hosting. Mayor Wu, thank you, of course, for leading this work. And as Jason has indicated, the early work of Universal Pre-K, it really strengthened the partnerships between our families, our community partners, and Boston Public Schools. And now with Mayor Wu's commitment in the Office of Early Childhood, we're really going to be able to solidify that partnership and fill those gaps. 0 to 3, career development for early educators, family childcare. I am so excited about the work that we're going to do together. Together, we're going to build this system, and we're going to make sure that each child and family thrives, as you've indicated, in Boston. Mayor Wu, thank you so much for your commitment. I am just excited to do this work, and so thank you so much for all of us joining, and I'm looking forward to it. Thank you. Take care.
We'll close out our speaking program with Jeri Robinson, Executive Director of Smart from the Start.
Good morning. Just like all of my colleagues that are here today, this is an extremely exciting day for me. I want to take a minute to shout out all of the families that Smart from the Start represents across the city of Boston, and to say thank you on their behalf to Mayor Wu for seeing them and for making their needs a priority. Smart from the Start is a family support, community engagement, and school readiness initiative that has as our mission to promote the healthy development of children and families across this city who have infinite potential but a lack of resources. It has been 15 years for Smart from the Start that was born in this city with the help of Mayor Menino, who had a vision of a citywide coordinated effort to support children and families so that our children would have every opportunity to achieve their greatest potential. Today, after all of these years, Mayor Wu is finally bringing that vision into fruition, and it is an emotional day for me. I was born in this city. I was raised in a housing development in Roxbury by two parents who were wonderful and were committed, but didn't have the resources to give their kids the same opportunities as some other folks in this Commonwealth. I'm the single mother of 5 children raised in this city as well. And I know firsthand from those experiences that, you know, I've walked in the mile, a mile in the shoes, the tiny little shoes of the kids that we're talking about today. I've struggled to navigate the same systems that the parents and caregivers that we're talking about today are still struggling to navigate. The creation of this office will give those of us in the community, families, parents, community providers, an opportunity to build real collaborations and real bridges with city resources and city departments that can help us to really have an opportunity to prevent the academic achievement gap instead of trying to close it once it exists. So with that, I just want to thank Mayor Wu for providing our children with an opportunity, no matter what they look like or where they're from or who their parents are, to have, every resource made available to them so that they can achieve school and subsequent life success, and for our families to have access to the tools, resources, and supports they need in order to thrive. I am thrilled to be here today and to be part of this effort. And I just want to say to Mayor Wu and her team that this has been a long time coming for this city, and I am personally extremely grateful. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Did I miss anyone else like to chime in? Okay, a few questions?
Going to work on the front end. If I'm a parent in East Boston seeking out childcare, what's going to be different with the new office?
Sure. So right now the system is quite fragmented in some ways. There have been huge strides made in the last few years with the UPK office and collaborations and partnerships. We're really looking to continue creating access to the entire ecosystem. But right now, it's easier to find access to the seats that exist in Boston Public Schools through the lottery process and through the assignment process as with any other school seats, or some of the seats at our community-based, center-based childcare that are now partnering with Boston Public Schools and, as you heard, have the same curriculum, same pay structure, and there are certain classes set aside for that UPK program expanding outside of Boston Public Schools as well. The vision for this office is to create a one-stop shop so that not only school-based seats, center-based seats, but also home-based seats, the family-based childcare programs that exist throughout our neighborhoods that are often providing culturally competent and responsive care, that are responsive to the hours that families need, that have that flexibility, that we will surround the entire ecosystem and help make those connections. Because often our childcare providers, our early educators, are doing everything perfectly in terms of educating our young people, but they're not set up to be the publicists and marketers to make those services known throughout the city, and they're not set up to operate all of the accounting and this and that that a small business could use support for. So we look to supplement the supports on the technical assistance side so that all of our childcare entrepreneurs have access to the full range of resources, professional development, funding, and other programming to help boost that quality access citywide. And for families to be able to, in one place, see which seats are available in which places. Now, the ultimate dream, and I know I'm not supposed to put everything out there, but I'm just going to lay it. We're not going to get there tomorrow, but the ultimate dream is for any family living in the city of Boston, let's just say anyone who is looking to start a family in the city of Boston, to know that this is a city where it'll be convenient, easy, and not a question whether you can find the supports to raise a child here. We want to create a system where every single one of our little treasures is cared for and done so affordably near where it's convenient to you, whether that's near work or whether that's near home. And so there's a whole range of changes that we're looking to implement. There's some zoning changes that we're hoping to formalize. There exists an inclusion of daycare facilities provision in the zoning code that allows for or that requires a commitment to on-site childcare at some of our largest commercial office buildings. So we look to strengthen that, to provide funding through that mechanism as well. We look to eventually have a one-stop shop enrollment system. And it's complicated because different slots that have subsidies available require different conversations with state and applications separately. But for now, even to get to the point where we have one system where you can see all the seats what are available in real time. That would be a huge step forward on all these fronts. And then to really connect our vocational programs and technical assistance to help stabilize and strengthen the early education workforce is a huge priority as well.
It would be a website, and I just want to clarify that. Would you hope there would be a website?
Well, I mean, you can't do anything without a website these days, really. But the idea is that we will centralize all the services within City Hall, provide a one-stop shop across the entire ecosystem. That will include a website, but it also will include connecting all the offices where people go to get services one by one right now. Just within the city of Boston, that includes Boston Public Schools, Boston Public Libraries, BCYF, Mayor's Office of Women's Advancement. So we'll look to coordinate and then really strengthen partnerships with our community leaders as well.
Are you committing to increasing the number of seats available for families at no cost to them? And is the city going to be putting more money into that?
So the goal is for every family across the city to have access that they can afford to high quality childcare that's convenient to them. We need partnership from the state level, and I'm so grateful to our state rep here for leading the charge on making sure that there will be a legislative push for costs being capped at a percentage of a family's income. We know just from our childcare census, okay, let me take a step back. The suggested proportion of your income for childcare to be affordable to a family is 10%. Right? You hear that rent is supposed to be about 30% of your annual income. Childcare being affordable is 10% or less than that. The vast majority of families are having trouble finding that in Boston, and we see nearly half of families in Boston at well over that level of being unsustainable in terms of childcare costs. And so Adrian's bill here would cap that, is it at 7%? Phasing it in at 7% of a family's income on a sliding scale. And so that would be a huge, huge step forward for families in Boston and across the Commonwealth. We also look to continue putting funds to our childcare entrepreneurs through the existing Childcare Entrepreneurship Fund, which would help strengthen and create new seats. But if you ask any of our providers here, and I'll hand over the mic to anyone who wants to chime in, sometimes in Boston, it's less of an issue of not having enough seats. There are many, many providers all across the city who are doing incredible work. It's more ensuring that there's consistency across all of those seats so that they are high quality and consistent in curriculum, in hours, in pay and salaries for the educators, as well as ensuring that they are known and available to family members, to families, because right now it's very difficult sometimes you go through your lists where you search for all the different providers, and this one's filled up and now that one, and there's not a single place to see what's available at what time. Do you all want to chime in on this at all? Okay.
Families to charge you right now, or is it something that is further up in the future?
We are hiring for a director for this office, and so we'll be staffing up the leadership of this office, and we will also be, again, strengthening the coordination. We've had some conversations internally also and starting to build those City of Boston communication channels, and we'll be making further announcements about some of the policy measures I had mentioned before around zoning and other provisions that this office will help oversee.
You had mentioned that the Public Health Commission be reviewing the mask mandate. Is there any update on that?
They're scheduling a meeting. Dr. Basola Ojukutu and the Board of Health will be in consultation to really not just think about this current step in the pandemic and where we are in terms of Boston's readiness to move towards lifting certain protections, but really to set a parameter, a framework for how we live with this pandemic going forward. I know the toll that it's taken on our systems across the city and on our families and workforce to feel like we're constantly lurching from surge to surge, and when is this happening, when is that happening. So we're looking to add a framework that will provide some certainty moving forward and to help really open up the decision-making process and ensure that we are creating some metrics and creating some plans so that as we head out of this surge, we're not just putting it in the back of mind, but preparing for next year as well.
metric thresholds at this point?
The Board of Health and Dr. Ojukutu will be taking that up, but as of this moment, there are no metrics to announce.
Of making universal access for 3 and 4-year-olds to preschool. I'm just wondering if that's still your goal and when you hope to achieve that.
That is still the goal. We are, well, why don't I bring up BPS to talk a little bit about where we are, too.
Hi, I just want to highlight, I think Mayor Wu kind of indicated this, that we don't have an access problem. We have a quality equity problem. So there are tons of providers across Boston that are prepared to provide seats. What we need to do is make sure that they have equitable access to funding so they can market and fill those seats. Universal Pre-K will expand this year. We'll have 930 seats and with our community providers, which will be available in April. And we want to encourage families to fill those seats as much as possible. Last year, we were at 90% full. That's for this year. And so as much as we can promote and fill those seats, we will. I just want to emphasize it's really about quality and making sure that our providers have the funding so they can meet the quality that we're indicating.
How many seats for 3-year-olds will there be next
There'll be 330 seats, so that's we went from 150 to 330 for this year. Well, that part I think we would probably get from the census data. I think it's important to note that we want to make sure we focus on quality and not just creating seats. We want to make sure staff, absolutely, and we're going to continue to grow in a way that's focused on quality, right? Paying staff, state requirements, curriculum that works, right? Professional development, career. We want staff to stay, and those are all of the things that we're going to help build together.
This is coming from our city budget. We're looking to coordinate and consolidate some of the services that are being offered, and there are many roles across the city that have been turning over and haven't been filled, so we're looking to reorganize some of the roles that are available. And I'll just, State Rep Madaro just mentioned to me, just in terms of the last question and what TeeAra was saying towards the end about the workforce, it is really important that we ensure that there's public support and funding available to supplement the salaries and the sustainability of being an early educator. And so the legislation would not only address costs on the family side, but also provide funding to supplement those salaries and really invest in our early education workforce as well.
Do you have a time frame of when this office will be up and running for families to turn to for resources?
We're already continuing to work with BPS to expand in all the places that we currently are serving families and serving children and infants. This office will be a reorganization and looking to streamline and provide some of that one-stop shop in terms of the website and other features. So no timeline on that yet, but as soon as we hire a director for that role, that person will be charged with really hitting the ground running and making sure we're seeing immediate progress.
Next year's budget, that would be next year's budget, that would be probably.
We're looking to hire someone right away in this role.
To the masking, UMass Boston, they lifted some of their, or loosened some of their restrictions on masking, and I'm just curious how that works with them being within the public institution within the city of Boston. And I'm also wondering if you guys have a date in mind where you would lower that mask mandate.
So this is a great question because it can be quite confusing what rules apply to what areas across the city. There are, it's probably easiest to think of it in terms of a couple different categories where we're talking about masks in Boston. One is the city's, let me back up and start with the state. One is the state's rule around masking in schools, and the governor has announced that that will be lifted as of February 28th. And so any school district at that point on will be free to decide on their own what they're doing in terms of masks in schools. The city of Boston separately has an order for masking in indoor public spaces. So spaces like restaurants or other areas where the general public gathers. That does not apply to indoor private spaces like dorm, university property, for example, or someone's private home. And so that is separate for those institutions and property owners to decide on their front. Any, for example, large office building is still free to decide, or any individual store is still free to say that they are requiring masks in their spaces, separate from the city's rules. So the city, and then the city's conversation is around indoor public spaces as well as the Boston Public Schools. Both of those will be mentioned and discussed as part of the Board of Health's meeting, which is to be scheduled shortly. No, we're hiring this position first and then building it around there.
Boston Public Health Board meeting that hasn't been scheduled yet, but it will be soon.
Very soon.
Particularly in East Boston, there are many undocumented families that are afraid to participate in government programs, so how can this benefit them?
La ciudad de Boston es una ciudad para todos y incluyen todas las familias de Boston, todas las familias inmigrantes, incluyen familias sin documentos. Entonces, en las escuelas públicas o los edificios públicos o cualquier programa de Boston no necesita documentos, no necesita, no incluyen la coordinación con el sistema de inmigración federal. Este programa es un recurso para todas las familias en Boston.
And one more question in English. Do you have any plans to combat skyrocketing rent in Boston?
We saw a tiny dip during the pandemic in terms of housing costs, but we are right back up to how unaffordable it was pre-COVID, and housing prices continue to go up. So housing has to be the foundation of our recovery from the pandemic. We are using federal funds to lay out a plan to increase and build more affordable housing, to stabilize and renovate existing affordable housing, and to move through our zoning code and other rules so that we can speed up the processes and get people in homes more quickly. Housing is intimately connected to so many other issues that we're discussing today here too, though. So transportation access is fundamental to opening up housing that is affordable. Childcare supports are fundamental to keeping people in their homes and in communities that they can afford. And so we're working on all these fronts all at the same time, but housing is certainly one big priority and remains so. Great. Thank you, everyone.